Hi, my name is Preston Cochran, and I'm one of the house engineers here at Tracesource Studio in Nashville, Tennessee. In this three-part video series in partnership with Vintage King and Universal Audio, we're going to take you through the tracking, mixing, and mastering of an entire song featuring the Apollo hardware, the UNISON pre's, and the Luna software.
Whatever happened to cutting me some slack? I'll wait for you to come back. I'll wait.
Behind me is our vintage NEVE 8014. It is the heart and soul of Tracesource, and today in this first video, we are going to put the Apollo UNISON pre's head-to-head with our NEVE that was customized by Vintage King. In order to achieve the most apples-to-apples comparison between the UNISON mic preamps and our NEVE preamps, we are using transformer isolated mic splitters. That means every mic at every source is being split and recorded through both signal paths at the same time. Today we have a local Nashville artist, Carl Anderson, who's brought in a song, and I will be playing bass. We'll be having our friend Jake Finch playing drums, and Sam Wilson will play electric guitar. Scottie Prudhoe is the other house engineer here at Tracesource. He's gotten a reputation in town for getting absolutely killer drum sounds in our room, and he is going to be acting as head engineer and wearing the producer hat with myself. We are going to see how close we can get the Apollo UNISON pre's to sound to our real NEVE hardware and all of our analog gear.
One more time, Carl.
I'm using 8 microphones on the drums. 2 of those microphones are on kick, and 2 of those microphones are on snare. Because to me, when I listen to pop music, when I listen to music that I like, especially involving drums, those are the 2 most important things. For our kick in, we're starting off with the Helios mic preamp. The UNISON preamps do a wonderful job of emulating this. From there, we're going to the line amp of a 1084. In the case of getting the sounds with the UA distressor versus the actual hardware distressor, I'm doing pretty much the exact same thing. So this distressor sounds awesome. So the kick out, I'm using the 1084, which is exactly what I'm doing on the desk, and the API, but I'm also using the Blue Stripe. Obviously the attack and release are different in hardware form and in plugin form. The Universal Audio one has this nifty headroom knob, and so I'm able to adjust the headroom to get a closer approximation of our Blue Stripe in the box, which is awesome. So transitioning to what I'm doing on the top snare, in very similar fashion, I'm using a 175B. My input stage is a lot hotter than the hardware, and the veneer is in a different place, but I am getting a very similar sound from each one. I mean, this is probably one of the best sounding comp limiters ever made. So on my overheads, I'm using the 33609, which I'm using our 33609 piece of hardware. Again, I have this mix knob, I have the headroom knob, I have these little things that you do not have with hardware. If you wanted to do that with a piece of analog gear, you'd have to bus it, burn 2 channels, have that go to tape. With this, I'm just using the same channel. If I wanted to dial back to the dry, I think that's a game changer. Especially on a classic piece of gear like a 33609. So when we started this whole process, I was not sure how close I would get using plugins and the Apollo Luna system to my normal analog workflow using all of the gear that I know so well. But the UNISON mic pre's sound awesome. We'll start with the acoustic guitar. We're just going to kind of bounce back and forth from the NEVE to the UA stuff. A good tell for me on a good mic preamplifier, whether it's a NEVE or whether it's any piece of analog gear, is how it behaves in regards to drums. Drums are probably the hardest thing to get a good sound of, in any space, whether you're in a world-class recording studio or your house, they'll give you the most grief. And so let's listen back and forth between the drums tracked on our NEVE console with our outboard gear to the stuff tracked with the UNISON pre's and the UA plugins. Another thing to solo up here, another good way to listen to like your core of your track is bass. You have drums and bass, the heart of the music, and those are things that I really try to not compromise any sort of fidelity. I don't try to compromise any tone. So let's listen to the NEVE with the LA2A and the UNISON preamp NEVE to the Apollo Universal Audio LA2A. So for this production, I was hearing sort of a 80s or early 90s chorusy, chuggy guitar. And, you know, for that signal path, I used the NEVE, a 57. I could have stopped there. I used an LA2A as well, just to give it a little more character and color. Let's just take a listen to this. So to record Carl's voice, I used R. Neumann U48 and 1073s. I used the UNISON Pre 1073 and I used R Hardware 1073. I lightly compressed it with an LA2A, so just doing like little compression, grabbing the peaks, nothing heavy. And then I followed that with a PULTEC, and I'm just, you know, adding that in there for a little bit of extra warmth. And I followed that up with the EMT 250. Just to have a little bit of reverb so Carl had some in his cans and everybody could kind of vibe to the track. Let's take a listen to how that sounds.
I'll wait for you to come back into my loving arms. You know it's true. When you're blue, I'm the one you run to, baby. Maybe you're right. Maybe it is too late, but just in case.
I guess the final test, and this is probably the most interesting test for me, is listening to the entire mix. Granted, I guess not really a mix. This is a rough mix of basically what we tracked today. And so we're going to bounce back and forth between all the stuff tracked with the Luna and Apollo stuff and the analog signal, and we're going to see how that sounds.
I'll wait for you to come back into my loving arms. You know it's true. When you're blue, I'm the one you run to, baby. Maybe you're right. Maybe it is too late. Just in case. I'll wait.
The UNISON mic pre's sound awesome. I haven't heard more accurate representations of classic mic pre's in my life. It is almost indistinguishable at times, even to me, who knows this stuff like the back of my hand. Having worked in Luna all day, I will say it is very similar in how it's mapped, laid out, kind of workflow. It's very similar to like a streamlined tape session, in my opinion. In other words, it's not like a glorified piece of editing software. It has the feel of like a tape machine and a desk with the inserts and the modules, which, in my opinion, having done that a lot, when you work with that kind of workflow, it's almost like the tracking equipment, the transport, everything is like kind of an instrument, and you're playing it as it goes. And it's really exciting that you have everything at your fingertips. You can see everything, and the plugins pop up, and you can adjust things in real time. And you can choose to print it, and the preamps are there. It's a very nice little workflow. I feel very comfortable using it. Obviously, it helps that it's almost all the plugins are based upon actual hardware that I use all the time. But it stands up sonically to some of that stuff, which is obviously like when you look at a Blue Stripe or you look at an LA2A, those are iconic pieces of audio equipment. They're tough shoes to fill, and the plugins, do it. If I didn't have the luxury of working on a NEVE desk every day, all day, I would be really happy getting these sounds.
I'll wait for you to come back into my loving arms. You know it's true when you're blue.
In this video, you're able to see how we use the Apollo units, their UNISON pre's, and their near zero latency to effectively lead a professional tracking situation in our studio space. We also got to hear how the UNISON pre's actually sound in comparison to our NEVE console. Tune in for the next video where you get to see Scottie Prudhoe add some of his mixing magic in Luna and finish out Carl's song. Thank you for watching, and thank you to Vintage King and Universal Audio for letting us try out some awesome new gear.